Hey everybody, we're going to try something a little different for this one. Instead of me writing notes in your grade sheet, I will just give you your notes here, and then your grade sheet will actually have point you back to this link, so you'll be able to watch the feedback, and hopefully it'll be a little more clear on what I'm talking about. Just the number of people, this seems like it'll be a little easier to go this way. So I'm just going to go through them alphabetical order here. Ransom Barnes. I'll open it up. All right. So my big notes on this. I think that your lighting actually looks pretty good. It's really bright from this angle. Like it feels like we're kind of washing out here. But from back here at this angle, it's almost a little too dark. Like it needs to be like the contrast is sort of upped a little bit. You may be able to just go in here and add a little bit of extra lighting over here just to bring up some of these, bring up some of the lighting in this area, or just turn up the intensity or exposure a little bit on the background. Because it's just that a lot of this is kind of going into shadow. Something that you'll notice, like right here, you see just a little bit of grain. And once we get over here, you'll see more of this grain. A lot of that is just turning up the samples on this, on your sky dome. So let me just kind of show you what I'm talking about there. Sorry, let me close that one down real quick. So in this one over here, if we go to lights, sky dome light, it's with this selected. If you go to your attribute editor, it's just this samples right there, and so crank that up to 5. See if you still get those little dots. That will slow your render time down just a little bit. If it still does, still has the little like grain to it, then maybe crank that up to 7 or 8 or something like that. 5 seems to be a pretty nice like starting point. Doesn't impact your render too much. There's some other areas in which we can dial this in more precisely in your render settings. So we go to right here. These different things are different versions of the samples, right? It's like the sample from your camera view, your diffuse. Sometimes when you make something transparent, you'll see that the transparent parts are, right, when you use that transmission option, you'll see that the transparent parts have this a little extra grain in it. And so just turning that up to like 3 will make that render a little bit better, or maybe even 4. And what this will allow you to do is dial it in a little bit so it doesn't impact the render overall as much. So it's a little bit of both of those things. Right now what this means though is this is the number of like little points of light that are being cast off of this object. And so if you leave that down at 1, it's just always going to have a little bit of grain in it. So, all right. In terms of the animation, this is looking really pretty good. You got that poppiness to the jump. I'll be honest, I am not crazy about that last camera motion. So I think you go up, and like that first little motion up is a little fast right here. And so some of the interesting stuff that we see, like the stretch on the character, kind of gets lost in the fact that the camera's moving. And then the same here, like we kind of lose just the fact that the camera's moving and the objects are moving. It's kind of hard for our eyes to track stuff. And then this one is just way too fast. So what I would consider doing is like just sort of scale back the camera a little bit, maybe have it moving a little bit more around at the beginning here. That way you don't have so much, you don't have to cover so much ground in such a short amount of time at this point. So the model looks cool. You get a lot of great squash and stretch in here. You get a lot of nice rendering. Kind of feels like your textures are all sort of pinching toward the center here a little bit. So maybe there's a little bit more UV work to be done on that. But overall, this looks really good. So great job. Okay, Abdullah. Okay, so I think we've kind of talked about this one a little bit. I know you had some issues where you lost some of the animation. Good job at just getting sort of those last little bits done. So I'm going to kind of break it apart into the individual elements here. The bouncing ball, like I really like the bounce part. The only thing that's really missing to me is like the roll right there at the end. It kind of feels like it slides a little bit right in this last little bit right there. And I think that's just controlling that RX, RY, RZ value. I'm getting just a little bit more roll in it. It'd be nice to have some sort of squash and stretch on this bottle so you could see it instead of just sliding it back, like make it feel like it's hopping back or something like that. And then finally, I think just, you just need a render on this. So good job at getting something done and in the folder on time. Just, try to squeeze in some revision time for this, and I think you can pull this one up to a pretty strong piece. So I'm going to double check on some of these just to make sure you haven't already turned in revisions. So Sierra's turned in one for both of them, so that's cool. I will try to remember to come back when I get to Sierra's in the revision folder. So, but yeah, good job, Abdullah. So, Ben. Throw it in the screen. Oh yeah, I like this. So, I like the squash and stretch. I like that you can change the color, so you don't really have to worry about the rolling. This looks really pretty good. It kind of feels like it's full of water instead of clear, and I think some of that just in the translucent or transmission part, you can change sort of the depth of this. So it feels like a glass bottle full of water. I have a feeling you were going for an empty plastic bottle, and right now it's warping the light behind it a little too much. So I think just turning down the transmission of that, you could play around with it. Really, my only notes other than that is that kind of watch out for texture stretching. So I would consider just like this brick wall back here, I have a feeling that's just a plane with a texture on it. Just getting that pattern to repeat some, so it's not like these bricks are a little too tall for how wide they are. So I get the feeling that's the texture stretching. Sort of the same thing here, that text feels like it's sort of stretching. And most of that on this bottle is going to be in the UVs. The last little thing, like the jump is a little squishy, like it's a little slow on the bottle. It just makes it feel like, I think that's also adding to it feeling like it's like full of water. Like it's kind of moving like a waterbed. I think just sort of speeding up the pop up and back down. And I don't really see any evidence of much of a bend on here. That wasn't really necessary as part of the assignment. I think you managed to make it look pretty neat the way it is right now. But I think it could add just a little bit more personality to it. So, good work. Sierra. Okay, so I'm going to look at your first one here, and then I'll go look at your revision. All right. So just so we can see the difference between the two. Okay, it's looking cool. Revisions. That's neat. Let me kind of look at the difference between the two really quick one more time. So in this one, kind of have that ground texture going on that wasn't in your other one. I kind of like what you're getting out of that ground texture, but it is a little on the blurry side. So I don't know. You can play around with that. Like it gives you like a little bit more information to track the camera motion. So like the fact that the camera is moving, the way we know that is because like these little dots are all moving in unison, right? And sometimes camera motion can get confusing if our eyes don't have like peripheral elements to track. The other thing it's doing is it's getting you some slightly more interesting reflections going on in your bottle. But I do think that overall this one is this one's like cleaner looking. Like it is a very nice looking render too. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with this. If I'd have seen this one the first time, I wouldn't have said, "Oh, you need texture on the ground." But Like that is a little bit on the perfect side in terms of like material on the ground. So if you're looking for things to change on it, that would be one of the few things that you could do with like the lighting and rendering part of it. In terms of the animation, the ball seems like it's squashing before it gets to the ground. So if we watch it as it's coming down, it's stretched right here, right? But it's already squashed before it gets to the ground. It also doesn't feel like it's completely hitting the ground on that panel right there, right? So again, it may be skipping a frame, but what I would do is I would keep it stretched until right before it squashes. So keep it stretched like right here just a little bit, and that way it can like give us a reason to feel like the ground impact is what's stretching it. I see it a little bit more like right here as well. Like you can tell that it's like it's kind of starting to squash earlier, so it's not bad, but I can feel it a little bit early on some of these. So play around with when that happens a little bit. I love the animation on the bottle. The bottle looks great. The materials look great on it. And I like that you went kind of subdued with the background. It's not too noisy back there. I can believe that this is in that world. So yeah, great job on this. I like that you kind of went a little bit extra on the motion as well. You kind of get a little bit of a head flop, I guess, like a twist. So let's see, after Sierra, Wyatt. So I'm going to move this over here. So I think this one actually looks pretty good. Get a lot of nice lighting and rendering stuff going on here, and I know you worked really hard on that. The texture's looking good. I think the bottle jump is looking good. It's kind of looking a little bit like it's sticking to the ground a little bit. We'll talk about that just a second. Like right there, you see how it kind of stretches out for the jump, but then it still seems like it sort of stays stuck to the floor just for a little bit before it kind of pops up. And so like really that moment that it's stretched out should be the last instant that it's touching the floor. So like you see it like stretches, but then like it comes off the floor a little slow there, right? And so I think really just like the moment it hits there, the next frame it should already be like up in the air, right? And it just kind of feels like it sort of takes it a little bit of time. You have this ball kind of stop suddenly, but it felt intentional. Like you almost wanted it to feel like the ball was intentionally stopping, which I'm okay with. Either that, or I think I sort of have it sort of slow to a stop, or maybe even still be rolling just a little bit right at the end of its path here. Because right now it kind of feels a little bit like it's hitting something or some other force is causing it to stop. And that's why I said it felt like it was stopping itself. And then this part here, I love that idea. I think it's scaled just a little wrong. Like I think this thing needs to, the bottle needs to inhale, for lack of a better word, a little bigger. Right, get really up there and exaggerate it, and then it needs to exhale a little faster and more, like completely, like really get it empty, and then shoot it off the stage a little faster for me to believe that the air out of this blew, that like move this forward. Now, I know you had also talked about having like some like something like sort of squirt out of it, like hot sauce or something squirt out of it. But otherwise, I think this is looking really good. I love what you have going on with the little environment pieces. The wallpaper pattern to me feels a little on the big side, and that may just be because I'm kind of seeing some of the like so much of the texture detail there. It almost makes it feel like a rug or something on the ground on the back. So if you could get that to repeat a little bit, but I like the pattern. Something that would probably happen in the real world here. Let me see if I can just open a new tab. Yeah, I have a lot of tabs. Something that would probably happen in the real world is if we look at, you've probably seen these before, tilt shift images. And it's images where you make something really big look really small. And it's actually really simple on how they're doing this. They're just blurring a little bit of the foreground and a little bit of the background, right? And what's actually happening is it's tricking our eye into thinking that this is a miniature by implying that there's a lot of depth of field because we're taking a small photo, like a really it's not a great example. Like if you take a really up close, like detail photo of something, you get that high level of depth of field, right? And so like that's what we're. I mean to close that. That's really what we're kind of getting is that feeling of something being smaller in those tilt shift images. I think that where we're kind of close in here on these elements, and this feels like it's kind of small. This is really like crisp, and we're seeing a lot of details in there. And if we were to be shooting this with a real camera, we would actually have a little bit of depth of field in there. Now that's pretty advanced, so I'm not saying you should be putting that in there. But I think in the future, that's one of the things that I can show you how to do is make this a little bit more blurry, and it's going to give us that like camera effect of this being like a close-up shot. That's actually in Maya's camera settings. So if I were to select this perspective, there's a depth of field setting in here. It's kind of hard to control though because it wants to know like what your focal distance is. It wants to see like what's up close and what's not up close. Like where's the area in which we should be focusing. And you also have to turn on in Arnold, you have to turn on depth of field, I think. Maybe not. You may, for Arnold, you may just have to turn it on there because I actually don't see anything in here that's requiring us to turn on depth of field. Having said all of that, depth of field and motion blur, both of those will kind of add to it. But having said all of that, it will slow down your render. Depth of field will slow it down a lot. Motion blur slows it down a little bit as well. But all of those things will help a little bit. Yeah, again, having said all of that, this is actually a really strong piece as it is. So yeah, great work. There's my so many files. There we go. Okay, Gabe. Yeah. So I think the first few bottle jumps feel like the bottle's jumping really hard but not traveling very far. I love everything that happens with the bottle like falling and like the head sort of like happening afterwards. That's that overlapping action we're talking about. The whole thing feels like it's a little fast to me though. And I don't know if that's in Maya fast or if when you brought it into Premiere, you have it playing at 30 frames per second instead of 24. Play blast your video out, and if the play blast is going slower than this, then it's a Premiere issue. But either way, like it needs to be slowed down a little bit. I think the materials and the lighting look good, or the materials look good. The lighting looks good. It'd be nice to like see a little texture work happening in here, even if it's just like something on the ground or on the wall. Not necessarily like having to like wrap a this seems like a ketchup bottle to me, like a Heinz ketchup around it or anything like that. I think a lot of this stuff right now is just working with the animation. I like you're trying to show that the bouncing ball is alive by having it stop at the beginning and think about it, and then do this like jump away, right? And I think that there's a lot of stuff happening in the like bounce and like knocking the bottle over. That part's happening too fast. I also think that like some of like your squash and stretch is getting messed up. Let me open this up in open with. Let's see if it'll open in QuickTime, because I can frame by frame it in QuickTime. Well, that doesn't seem promising, does it? Alright, I can kind of do it in here too. But you can see there it goes, it opened in QuickTime. You can see really like what's happening here as you're your ball's coming toward the ground, it's like slowing down right before it hits. And that means that you're kind of missing a channel that is happening there. So let me go ahead and close these and I'll show you. This is something you may not know, but you can open videos in Photoshop as well. So I'll drag this in here and that way I can kind of draw on the video for you. So like if you look at your character's or your ball's arc from here to like here, as it's slowing down, right, what we're getting is sort of this like we're getting this arc where it kind of does like that, right? And that's because the up and down motion isn't it is slowing down as it gets closer to the ground. So if you look at your translate Y on the ball, my bet is that the curve on that looks a little bit more like this, right? Now this is on the translate Y's curve, not on the ball's arc, right? And what we want is we want that bouncing ball's arc to look like that. And right now it's looking a little bit more like that, right? It's got these like slowing down parts in the middle. So the way we do that is if we just go into the graph editor on here, like you got these tangents that kind of go across through here. If you break those tangents on the translate Y and point those upward, you get these angled upward, it's going to get you a different curve. So I guess I've been drawing on this. I could show you in Maya really quick. Is that if I have let's do that. All right, and then I'm going to go halfway in between these, about to right there, raise it up. Halfway in between there, raise that up. I think I really probably took that second one too far. You're going to see that like this is kind of what I'm getting on my jumps. And it's that bottom part right there that's the problem, right? So if I open up my graph editor, you will see that that's what my tangent looks like. And if I were to go to my visualize, create editable motion trail, you kind of see that that's what my arc looks like. Again, I want it to look like an M. Like I want it to sharply, like these bell curves, right? So the trick to that is just to break these tangents. So you'll see I can grab that tangent, I can move it around, it changes the way that arc works. If I grab these keyframes, all three of those keyframes, and I click this button here, it will break those tangents, and then I can change this to look like this, right? And that's a little stronger, right? Now, there's also something going on with my forward and backward motion. I just need to set all of these right here to linear. All right, now we kind of get this like, I feel like kind of feels like it smacks the ground a little harder now. So, so that's what we're going for. And I just wanted to kind of give you what are all these things. Where did I set keyframes on the sky dome? How did I set keyframes on the sky dome? All right, doesn't matter. So that would be my 2 cents, is really kind of playing around with that, getting that to feel like it's hitting the ground a little more intently. Okay, so Hayden. All right. Let's see, we got a new scene. Don't save. So obviously this is going to be a lot of revision that you need to build this up to something. Okay, so there's nothing in there. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. So yeah, just Hayden, just give me a revision file. You have something in there, but it's not got really anything on all of the gradable areas. So you probably are. You definitely need to get a revision in there as soon as you can. So Nathan. So the bouncing ball's looking pretty good. The render's looking pretty good. It feels like there's a frame rate issue. It feels like it's like kind of playing this back at the wrong frame rate. It doesn't look like the bottle is rigged at all. And that is one of the gradable areas that's worth, I think, 20% of the grade. So that's going to be a big impact on the grade part there. Like just rotating it, like it doesn't feel alive. It feels like a lever that's being controlled by something. For something to feel alive, it needs to feel like it's deforming. It needs to feel like it's moving under its own volition. Like it doesn't feel like it's laying down, because I could not lay down on my back and just sort of raise up from the ground like that, right? I'd have to push off the ground in some way, and so that just the bottle is just undone or unfinished. So I'm also a little confused about the material. Like it looks like it's aluminum. I'm not sure if that's what you're going for or not. My guess is you're probably going for plastic. Play with the transmittance or transmission. Why did I close Maya? Oh, why did I open Maya 2017? Why do I ask all these arbitrary questions? Give me a second, and this will open up. There we go. Get us just a couple of things in here. Oh, where's Arnold? Really? Oh, there it is. We'll get us a Skydome light. I'll get us a plane. What? We'll get us a sphere. So I think that more than likely, I can't tell unless I look at the Maya file, you've assigned a new material. Right? And in that material, hopefully what you're choosing under Arnold shaders is AI standard surface. AI standard surface is going to be the one that gives you the most amount of options in here. Right? If you're choosing one of the others, like let's say for some reason you had chosen a Fong material, recognize that you can go over here to this type and still change that to AI standard surface. It's going to lose some of the settings, but the material will just change in there. So if you're wanting to make it look translucent, you can go to transmission and just crank this weight up. Now, just so we can see, if I were to put another object back behind here, on this side, and I'll put another one on up here too, just so you can see it like relation. If I were to render this, we're going to get some translucence through there. So it's really thick translucence though. So we not only have reflection on this side, like more than likely what we're seeing there is also this thing like mirroring through, right? One of the ways to test that is if we assign a new material. Let's go ahead and make that nice and blue. Alright, so when I go to Arnold render view, is it already open somewhere? It is. You'll see that what I'm actually getting is the blue one passing through, right? So some of the things we can do to play around with this is if I go to my transmission, right, select that object, do that again. So yeah, you can actually select objects in the render view. Hopefully you all know that. So I got my transmission turned up, right? It's this depth thing that we can sort of play around with, and the scatter, I think. There's also a that's not what I need. I think we can, I bet some of it is this. I'm going to turn some of that refraction down so we're getting to see through it just a little bit more. All right. And I really just want this depth to be affected differently. Because we're seeing all the way through it. Sometimes we can change that depth to something super high. It will not give me what I want. Is it color? No. Yeah, there we go. So it's our index of refraction on our specular, right? So if I turn this down, you'll start to see, like, now it's feeling clear and it's only refracting on the outside edges there, right? And then when I play around with this depth, I get a little bit of a different, it's not getting that much of a different result. And there's a couple of other little things we can kind of play around. So all of these are kind of connected together. And it really just depends on how much refraction versus reflection you want this to feel like, right? So that's going to make it feel like it's refracting along the edge there. And then I can also give it a little bit of brightness, or like a little bit of a reflection on there. You can also always add an extra coat if you're needing like some highlights on this. So you can get that coat up there, turn my roughness all the way down. And of course we have this thing up here which is really interesting, this metalness, which is going to also give us a little bit of like sheen to it, right? So we can kind of play around with all those materials to get something that's going to feel a little bit more like we're able to see through it, right? Okay, so that would have been my 2 cents on the bottle. That was, I kind of used yours as an example because I think multiple people are probably needing a similar type of tutorial. The other thing is, since you show us the top of it, that feels like that hole is too small to drink out of. Like it's like you would have to put a straw in there or something. So, all right. So, what am I doing? That's not what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. There we go. Michael. Bottle animation. Okay, file, new scene, don't save. So you have the bouncing ball. Doesn't look like you have any textures, or if you do, I wouldn't be able to see them because you just gave me the Maya file. Let's look and see. Lambert 1, everything has Lambert 1 on it, doesn't it? So get that. If we hit 6, we can see that on it. So it looks like you got a bottle. Oh, so you're still animating. So that's the NURBS object. So you're going to have a lot of hard time kind of getting the same deformation of that. But it looks like you don't have any of the deformers on there yet. And so that's part of the rigging process. So so the rigging is, you're getting some motion, maybe even some scale. You're doing some scale there. No, apparently not. And so that's a good attempt, but you're not really going to be able to get any of the deformation out of there unless you use the deformers. So you're going to deform non-linear, like a bend, right? So we can put that bend handle on there, put that under the control, right? And then I can get a little bit of bend on that. I think I bent the wrong thing though. I think I actually had the control selected when I did that. So instead I'll select the bottle, deformer, non-linear bend, and then you should be able to get some bend on that. Maybe take the high bound up and down. You can kind of play around with it to get a different version. So you've seen the tutorial, so just follow along with that. The terms of the bouncing ball, I think it's actually looking pretty good. Kind of feels like it's sort of pausing a little bit on the ground. I like that you're trying to get it to like chase it around. Still need to pull together some stuff with lighting and rendering and all of that as well. So cool. Again, like there's a lot of gradable items that are just incomplete on here. So just make sure you get a revision to me before the end of the semester. And I'll be happy, or as soon as you want, and I'll be happy to look at it again. So, I believe Sierra is the only one that has anything in the revisions, right? Yeah. So, just wanted to double check on that. Okay, so it was Michael, William. All right. Well, this was almost a month ago, so you need to get something in there. Tanner. Oh, okay, you got a revision in here. I'm gonna watch them both if that's okay. Watch the first one just to see what it is you revised. I love that landing. It's funny. I like the little expressive like things that come out. So here's the revised version. Oh, I get you. This is like the simple one. Oh, okay. Yeah, man, this is looking good. Both of them look good. I feel like the contrast feels a little on the soft side. And I think I think we kind of talked about the like, camera jitter on that. I kind of like it on the landing. It's maybe still just a little too much on the landing. But I'm sorry, back to the contrast. I feel like it's a little gray overall. Some of that could be the light source you're using here is just like gray clouds. So that's something to play around with. Like it just kind of feels like a gloomy day in this place. But that's all right. So you get this like I like this slow down thing, and then the zoom in. But I think we kind of talked about like we lose track of when it takes off, right? So if we watch it as we're zooming in, your camera is shaking, and then like it's still shaking all the way to like the character is taking off there, but then we get like a big shake over there, and my eye just loses track of everything. You get so many things that change over one frame that I just kind of miss it. So if nothing else, like have it sort of follow the bottle up when it does its jitter. So so the bottle is kind of loosely staying in the same area, right? And we can kind of keep track of it. I think really what I would do is I would make these camera jitters smaller and smaller as you get closer to the bottle. It's really all about like our eyes being able to track this stuff over a 24th of a second. Because we kind of missed the takeoff. And then this part where you're getting this camera jitter as it's flying through the air, I think this is just an issue of like, one of the reasons we know it's camera jitter in the other shots is because the background is sort of jittering around us. So like, think of it this way. If your camera is completely still and a single object is moving, our eye understands that means the object is moving, not that we're moving, right? If all of the elements in the scene are moving, that's how our eye knows that we are moving. The camera is moving, right? Right now, this background is so far away that even though it's probably moving a little bit with the camera, it's barely noticeable in comparison to how much this is moving to the camera. So it doesn't necessarily feel like the camera's moving. It feels like this thing's bouncing around everywhere. Which may be kind of what you're going for, but it feels like it's sort of the wrong energy. But you see how like the camera, even though it probably is moving a little bit, it's very, very faint. And I mean, it just feels like the object is. So I would actually probably take some of this camera jitter out of this and instead add some jitter to the object, like if you imagine like a rocket like heading towards space, right? It's going to have like a shimmy to it, and just adding a little bit of that, maybe even with some of the deformers, to just get a little bit of noise in that. I think that would probably work better. The landing, however, I'm like, that looks awesome. Maybe slow down some of that at the end, some of the camera jitter at the end, but overall, it's looking pretty good. So I like that you covered your bases by just getting a simple one, and then you did what you enjoyed. I guarantee you put a lot of work into this part you enjoyed. The fact that you enjoyed it means you're you're in the right area. Like even if it isn't animation, like you're having fun with this, you're gonna put a lot of time into it. I love what you have with like this debris sort of punching up out of it. So yeah, that came out really good. Nice. Okay, Noah.
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
I think they're talking. What's happening?
お前はもう死んでいる。何? お前はもう死んでいる。何?
Okay. They're saying, I have no idea what they're saying. It's in a different language. So I think my 2 cents is like, I'm sure I'm missing something with the gag, or with the joke with the audio, but all those pauses mean I never actually get to see the motion very well. So I would like to have seen 2 different versions. I'd like to have seen it where you didn't have this like sort of strange edit on it, just so I could sort of gauge it a little bit better from the motion, because it feels a little slow, right? Like you're cutting right in the middle of that jump up in the air, and I guess this is just sort of a note. Like it's even if it were a joke that like if you were applying to a job and this were a joke that the art director got, like understood, right? They would laugh, but they would still like not be able to gauge whether they should, pay you $80,000 a year or not. So like it's a kind of a big gamble to favor the joke, right? If you can pull off the joke and show quality, that's a good idea. But like, I think just editing this back together would really help. A couple of little things I noticed is like the ball seems very faceted, and so does the bottle. Like try like just pressing 3 to get a little bit of a better like, smoothing on this, and you'll get those like how it's very polygonal. It'll sort of clean some of that up. I like what you got going on with the render and the floor. I think you got a little bit of noise. Probably turning up the sampling will help, and I think that there's a chance that your specular level is a little high on the ball. What I can tell from the bounce is that it doesn't feel like, just from this here, like it doesn't feel like it's really bouncing in it feels like it feels like you may be using the wrong rotate, because it's like it's flipping there with its stretch intact, and so that's what that RX, RY, RZ was for, so it can roll while it's still stretching in one direction. It also feels like that the bounces are happening kind of in a straight line, and not in that sort of that bell curve shape that we talked about earlier. And then like there's a little bit of like a inconsistency there, and like that arc, right? Like, so I think it feels like it's kind of hesitating on the ground and then kind of lunging forward right there at the end. The bottle, I think its bounce looks pretty good. Maybe could add just a little bit more bend to it, but overall it's looking pretty good. So cool. Alex. Oh, cool. Yeah, I think within the first few minutes of this video, I talk about the sampling. That's where you're getting all this like kind of noise that's happening on the table here. Just turning up your samples from your light map will probably help. I like that you're having it like try to grab that ball and missing, or like, at least that's how I'm kind of reading it. I think that the squash, the stretch, and sort of the pop up all look good. It kind of seems like it hangs in the air and does like a weird wobble before it comes down. So like trying to clean that up would help. I think part of it is like it looks like the rotation is happening like it's like the let me see if I can frame it here. So the bottle is popping up with only a little bit of rotation, and then the rotation happens really quick right through there, right? And then sort of eases in, and then it goes down, right? And I think you just need all that stuff to overlap a little bit more, have more of that rotation happen as it pops up, so it's more rotated. Like maybe it's stopping right around there, and then having it kind of sort of all like finishes rotation through here. So the reason I say that is because like our eyes are really good at tracking arcs of things, and so right now, if my eye were tracking the arc on the tip of this bottle, it would probably go up and then over and then down, right? Instead of like a smooth like arc to its final destination. So I think just playing around with that arc, like you're actually attempting something that's really hard here. And it's because like when we're in the air, it's like all of the object's mass kind of averages out, and you find the pivot point for that average. And that's the point that your bottle would really be sort of twisting around. And right now you're having to rotate it based off of the ground pivot. Now, had I known that this was the animation you wanted to do, we could have rigged it a little differently to where it would have made that a touch easier. But it's not a big deal. I just thought I'd mention that. Like that's probably one of the reasons you're having issues getting that clean arc. Other than that, all of this looks really good. The bouncing ball looks a little like it needs some more roll on it, and like there's like maybe clean up some of the arcs. Maybe have it hit those ground objects a little harder. Like I really like the way you're popping the bottle up off the ground and sort of slamming it back down. I feel like the ball needs a little bit of that too. But overall, this is pretty solid. I really like the way you get your glass rendering. So good job, Robert. So I'm gonna check 1.0 and then 2.0. So let's just see what you got. Oh, nice. Okay, I remember this. Yeah, 1.0. Yeah, let's try just dragging 2.0 in there and see what you get on top of it. So I think we'll watch them both. Okay, cool. Yeah, I like that. I think the second one is definitely better. Yeah, I like it. And I think you're able to see a lot more about the model. Looks like whatever that ring is around the top, looks like that's kind of fixed in this version a little bit better. The only thing that's really, like, to me, like, I don't necessarily know why it's doing this, but like your bottle's more like leaning instead of bending, but that's not that big of a deal. I think it just kind of gives it a certain style. And the ball doesn't really look like it's rolling very much. It also looks like it maybe doesn't quite hit the ground on that last bounce. So it kind of eases into the ground. And then, like, I think after it hits the ground, it would have that friction that would cause it to roll. But the revision is definitely better. So great job there. I like the material stuff you have going on the bottle. It's also, I think, unsmoothed here. So that's probably one of the reasons why it just looks better overall. So yeah, good revision. Good job. And your lighting looks pretty good too. Okay, Aaron. Is that the ball doesn't kind of roll anymore. So check out that RXRY control on the ball. It should give you the option to roll the ball and still keep that squash and stretch. I feel like it eases in a little bit on the ground, so that's in the translation. I think this is a good example of the camera is moving all the time, and it's hard for us to tell if the camera is moving or if objects are moving because there's so that's it. But if you're going to move the camera, like we need to be able to something that's changing, not that the ball is sliding forward. One of the ways you could do that is just a simple texture on this, like something that has a little bit of so just a little bit of something so we know. It also probably gives us some more let's look at your pick here. Okay, yeah, so I think that was like your preliminary turn-ins. Okay. Keon. Okay, suave bottle. Okay, so you get like the start of the animation, and this is rigged a little bit, but no animation on it. Okay, cool. I'll remember this when I get like you have the file in here. Again, you have till the end of the semester to revise it. Remember that the semester doesn't get easier as we get closer to the end of it. Like you're going to have less and less time. So I would revise this as soon as you can. So let's see, file, new scene. I would say in terms of the bouncing ball, like you're getting this like ease in at the bottom, and I think this is a great example of what we were talking about earlier, which is like that's just your translate Y has no like all the tangents are easing in at the bottom, right? So if I break those, I can set those to linear and that'll help a little bit, but really I just need to move them up a little bit and kind of do like this, and it'll help too. And so I really want to make this look like a bell curve, right? And just by doing this on each of those, we're going to get a better bounce. Let me show you. I'll actually make these last two the way you had it, right? And just sort of watch the difference between those now. And I'll be able to see the playback very well. So those last two are going to feel very choppy. I'm not sure why it's playing back so slow. But that is, yeah, there we go. Let's see. Yeah, I can't really see it very well. Make a quick play blast of it so you can see that it kind of smacks the ground on each of those. Now the other thing to recognize is that like the height of that bounce, if the ball is not alive, the height of that bounce would like sort of consistently like reduce on every bounce. So why didn't it open my video? Oh well. You kind of get the idea of what I'm saying there. So don't save. Okay. So it's Keon. Check. Oh yeah. So me and you talked at length about this one, about getting that bounce to feel like it like bounces off something to cause it to roll in this direction, or to slow that roll down. Again, like kind of the simpler method of this is you have two bottles jumping. Just have it kind of roll to a stop after it hits the wall there, right? I think the roll needs a little bit of work. It kind of feels like it's rolling in the wrong direction. Like it's rolling as if it's like trying to slide toward the wall there. And so it's probably just the wrong like RX, RY, RZ. The last little thing I would say is like this object here and this object here, like the texture on there on those are a little blurry. But otherwise, like I really like the model and the scene and everything, and the bottles look kind of cool too. There's something that reminds them like of a, I don't know, like a Bailey's bottle or something like that. I don't know. Like there's a neat, or maybe like a I don't know. Like it seems like it would have like some sort of interesting chocolate sauce or something in it. So I like what you have going on here. Just a higher resolution image here and here I think would help. And you could always like take, if you're wanting this old-fashioned label, like it may be something that you would take into Illustrator and try to recreate it, draw over it or something like that, and I think you could get a better quality texture there. So yeah, overall it's looking good. Okay, Caden. All right. Okay, so it looks like you have the ball bouncing a little bit again. I think you get that same thing that a couple other people have, where it's like slowing down before it hits the wall there. Like try that. Try like standing on like a stack of books or something, and then jump off and try to see if you can slow down before you hit the ground. It just, you can't do it. And so like that is something that you really need to kind of work on to make sure that like that's it's impossible for us to defy gravity just because we want to. And so like that's going to hit the wall hard and bounce off, right? The other thing I noticed is you're just animating a sphere. Like there's a rig up on the network that that I provided for you that has a little bit more control. It's probably a little easier to animate too. So, new scene, don't save. There we go. In. So. Yeah, I think you got some neat stuff happening here. It seems like you're really kind of enjoying the modeling part of it. The table is super thin in terms of the modeling. And I know that's not, like we were mainly focusing on the bottle and the ball, but if you put the model in there, then, it's part of the world now and we have to kind of think about it. So I think adding a little thickness to that table would help. I like the little bar stools and stuff like that. Overall, the lighting is a little dim. It's like kind of gray, and so like however it is you're lighting it, cranking up that intensity or exposure so it brightens this up a little bit. I like your bottle. I like some. So you have some squash and stretch on your ball, and you have the jump on the bottle, but the bottle doesn't really deform any. It doesn't seem like it's got any deformers on any of these actually. And so that's part of the rigging part. So that'll be something to consider. And other than that, the thing I noticed is like the ball sort of bouncing up and down, but it's easing in on the ground part, and then it kind of lunges forward right there at the end. And so I think having that progressively lunge forward, and then that can just rolls away super fast. Like it rolls off the table at what seems like an appropriate speed, but once it hits the ground, it like shifts it into fifth gear and just goes. So I think playing around with your timing there and your camera motion is really fast right there at the end too. So that would be my notes on that. So Caleb. I like that. So I think you see this grain you're getting here a little bit in that. That's probably how you're getting it here in this sampling as well. That was the thing I was telling early in the class, or early in the video. I said that under your render settings, it's probably just turning it up on your specular a little bit and seeing if that fixes it. And that'll, because it only seems to be happening on the reflective objects. Right? I think your texture on the table is a little blurry, and if you could get it to repeat and get some repeating pattern in there, I think it would help, but you got to watch out and not be able to see the repeating pattern. I like the thing on the wall. This is like, you got a nice looking scene here, more of a complicated like faucet. I love that you made this animation more than it had to be, right? You have the bottle jumping out of the way. You get a little bit of like bend on that to give it some personality. The landing looks great, and then he does these two little jumps and leans over. Like all of this stuff with the McCormick's bottle, like the way it sort of like tips over slowly, like that's nice. The only thing I would say is it feels like it doesn't feel like it slowly rolls to a stop. It feels like it suddenly starts rolling after it hits the ground and sort of slides over and then stops suddenly. So just playing around with the way that eases and adding just a little bit of rotation to the ball. Because even if it's not like, even if you're wanting it to look like it's jumping, it's so perfectly vertical, like those lines are. Just messing that up just a little bit will help that. So yeah, great work on this. This is really nice. So good job. And last one, Marin. Ball becomes an egg, but oh well. All right. Okay, so the file size there, that's something we get sometimes. My guess is that you exported this out or play blasted this out, but didn't change the codec. So we need to use the H.264 codec, and it will give you a file size that's much more manageable. So, actually, while it's doing that, let me pull something up really quick. Yeah, this will work. So give me 1 second. I want to show you something after this. It will be helpful for you all. Okay. There we go. So yeah, it looks like maybe just your render size, you had that issue going on. It's like a Windex bottle or like some sort of spray bottle, and like I'm not sure what kind of bottle there. Like a squirt, like a hand sanitizer or something like that. So a couple little things. I like that you're playing around with these colored lights. Getting a little bit of pixelation in your background image here. But that's just something I noticed. I think that what we're getting here, I'm not sure if that's a reflection from your background or what, but it feels like a rough wood, but it's shiny. And it's only got that one division in there, so make it repeat. And also, I think you're getting like some faceting around the edges of your table that make it look very computer generated. So smoothing that or just adding more divisions, I think would definitely help. It's a lot of colors in the lighting, and so that, and I think what you may have is a couple of spotlights that are each casting different colors, and that's why we're getting these rings in the reflection. I think it's neat. It gets a little like psychedelic and hard to tell like what is the actual color of an object and what is the actual light color. I like that you're playing around with that. I really like the deformation on the bottle. Like you got some overlapping action right there after it swings through. It's like your bottle's doing that floppy thing though, or your ball is, and that's probably because you're trying to animate the rotation with the rotate instead of that RX, RY, RZ control. So just look at the little ring that's on there. There should be those extra R's, and that's why it's turning into an egg, as you said. I can't tell why this bottle falls over. It looks like maybe you were aiming for the idea that this one like scares it or possibly hits it, but it's just not in the right location, or right time. So maybe play with that a little bit. Yeah, cool. So, great job, y'all. I wanted to show you all this. So this is the sheet that I use to grade. You'll actually see a tab in here for each of our projects. I'm going to be doing the breakfast scene next. I want to explain like the grades. You always get this sheet from me at the end, but basically it's out of 20 points. If you have the bottle modeled and any additional modeling in the scene, that's what I use to determine that. Lighting and rendering, for those of you who are turning me in a Maya file, that's going to be a 0. Okay, so that's the most you could possibly make is an 80, and if that's everything else is perfect. And overall presentation is not going to be perfect because it's not actually presenting at all. So let's say you had a great I just chose Isaac Austin randomly here. This is not Isaac Austin's grade, so I just wanted to I just clicked on one. So let's say he had an incredible model, right? Really pretty good bottle animation. Let's say incredible ball animation. If you turn in something unrendered, he's still getting a 58, right? And again, I can copy that into anybody's here, so it doesn't feel like I'm picking on anybody. So I just need to let you see that. That's this is how I do the grading, and so yes, I give you time to do that revision. If you never turn in that rendering of that, like it's very possible that you'll fail the class. So please take some time to do those revisions. Like that's to help you, not to buy you extra time to not finish the project. So finish the project, or like it's going to be a failing grade. For those of you who had the bottle moving but no squash and stretch on it, like that's what this category is for here. And I'm sorry, no. Yeah, that's part of what this category is for here. It's also probably going to factor into the overall presentation, right? If the bottle isn't squashing and stretching, it doesn't present as if it's alive, right? And so those two things will be negatively impacted. Even if you animated the bottle bouncing very, with very good or with no ease in and out, and you're breaking the tangents and everything, if it's not deforming, I just don't believe that it's like squash and stretch is the first principle for a reason, right? It's because it shows us that the character is actually causing that action to happen by itself. So more than likely, the bottle animation is going to suffer pretty heavily because of that, and overall presentation will probably be impacted as well. So I'll be filling these out very soon. So I need to be clear about something. This was turned in a while back. All right, this was the 21st, right? And I gave people a little bit of an extension to turn in a revision a couple of days later. That was almost a month ago. If your name, and I'm recording this video right now so I can always come back and check, if your name is not in here right now, your grade on this is a 0, and it can never be higher than that. You cannot revise something if you didn't turn it in the first time. So I just need you to recognize that. You now have a 0 on this project, and that's not revisable. So just letting you know, that's the way this works. So having said all of that, for the vast majority of you, this was a challenging project. Great job on the effort you put into it. There was a lot of rigging. I feel like there was a lot of people made some big surges forward on this, and so good job. I'm going to try to do a video like this for the breakfast scene as well. So hopefully you'll be getting that here soon too. So thanks.